a very comprehensive way of getting to the same place.
There's a danger of a bit of unanimity breaking out, and it's also the case that the Noble Lord Moylan and myself are not always on the same page as people, but I think this is just straightforward, and I do hope the government listens to the fact that actually, even though we might be coming at this in different ways, there's concern on all sides. But also to note that this is a shift from what happened in committee, because I raised an amendment that tried to pose the same dilemmas by talking about the size of organisations. And there was many a noble lord who said size doesn't matter, and that didn't work. But it was trying to get at the same thing. I do feel rather guilty that in order to kind of move the core philosophy forward, that I've kind of dumped the small and micro-sized startups and SMEs that I also wanted to protect from over-regulation. But I just think that that's what's happened in this amendment. But now it seems an absolute no-brainer that we should find a way of exempting public interest organisations. Now, this is where I would slightly go further, which is I think we have a general exemption of public interest organisations, but with the ability for Ofcom to come down hard if they breach any, if they look as though they move from being low risk to being a threat. The public interest exemptions, as Lord Moylan has noted, happen throughout the world. And I do think that, although I don't, we don't want to waste time with me reading things out and so on, but I do think it is important, if you look at the wording of the amendment, of Amendment 29, because we're talking about, as it says, historical, academic, artistic, educational, encyclopedia, journalistic and statistical content. We're talking about the kind of online communities and that benefit the public interest. We're talking about charities, user-curated scientific publications and encyclopedias. This is surely not what this bill was designed to thwart. But there is a serious danger that if we put the amount of regulatory demands on them that the bill does, that they just won't survive. And I don't think that's what the government intend, but it's what will happen. The complexity of this bill, dealing with it, is going to take so much time and so much money for organisations that don't have it. And even the time factor, as somebody who runs a small organisation, now I feel like I ought to do that, which is a free speech organisation called the Academy of Ideas. I'm now declaring my interest. And also I'm on the board of something like the Free Speech Union. But when you have so much regulatory time to spend, that has actually cost you money. I mean, you will just go under. So that's the important thing. I also think that it really could waste Ofcom's time. Lord Hallam has explained that. I think it avoids them concentrating on the nasty bits that we want them to by wasting their time trying to deal with what is likely to happen. Right, just a couple of other things. I do think it's important to note that there is sometimes controversy over what is the definition of a public interest organisation, but it's not beyond our ken to sort it out. Because actually I googled it, that's still allowed. I came up with a Wikipedia page that still exists, that's always good. But actually, if you actually look, then public interest is indeed used across a range of laws. So the government know what kind of organisations they're talking about. It's not kind of like just being made up for the purposes of an exemption. And I think that it's also worth noting that nobody's talking about public interest projects and organisations not being regulated at all. It's an exemption from this regulation. So they still have to deal with the UK defamation law, data protection laws, charity law, counter-terrorism law, pornography laws, common laws. What we're talking about here, and by the way, their own missions and their founding articles, which require that they do some good in the world. That's what they're all about. So I think that the government should really take this seriously. Just finally, just on the rescue clauses, it is important to note that, and that's why there's a reference to the Gambling Act, that what this does is it says, if, however, there is a problem, Ofcom should intervene. And that was taken from what happens with the Gambling Act, which allows UK authorities to strip one or more gambling businesses of their licensing exemptions when they step out of line. So nobody's trying to say, don't look at them at all, but they are obviously should not be in the scope of this bill, and I hope that when we get back to the next stage, the government will have, on this at least, have accepted the amendment.
My Lords,